Hi, I'm Ray Andringa, and today I'm going to talk about prison literacy and how this issue connects to the field of sociology.
How do I explain what books, magazines, etc. mean to people kept in cages? Through a book, we are, for a short time, whole again.
Throughout this presentation, I'll be including quotes from inmates who received books from a Seattle-based nonprofit called Books to Prisoners. They provide reading materials free of charge to inmates all over the country, and sometimes the recipients write back. If they give permission, Books to Prisoners posts the letters on their website or into a book. Sociology is a scientific field that studies society and social interaction and aims to develop theories for why things work the way they do. It can be traced back to 1780 by the French essayist Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, but didn't take off until Auguste Comte started delving into it in 1838. All aspects and levels of society are examined, from the micro, or small, to the macro, or large. Micro covers things like the accepted rules within a conversation taking place between two people, while macro may look at the ways language has changed over time. Several key terms are integral to the study of sociology. A group is any number of people who share characteristics and interact regularly. A society is a group of people who interact and share a common culture. And culture is the set of practices, values, and beliefs that shape people's way of life. The individual and broader society are inseparable concepts, because you cannot examine one without the other. The term sociological imagination was coined by C. Wright Mills in 1959, and it describes the importance of being able to view events, experiences, or concepts with a lens of understanding, even when those things are very different from one's own personal experiences. It's become a key part of modern sociology, and through its use we can gain more insight and appreciation towards the behavior of others. Even if you can't relate, you can still empathize. This can be especially important with systemic issues, because sometimes an outside viewer will see someone else's struggle as a personal failing and miss the factors that were out of their control that contributed to their situation. A paradigm is a philosophical framework used to examine different aspects of human behavior and society. There are three main paradigms within sociology: structural functionalism, symbolic interactionism, and conflict theory, which is what we'll be diving into. Conflict theory examines the ways inequities perpetuate power differences. One of the most famous contributors within this concept is Karl Marx, who warned that the inequalities resulting from unbridled capitalism and rapid industrialization would become so extreme that workers would eventually revolt, resulting in his famous phrase, "Seize the means of production." You don't need to memorize the Communist Manifesto to look through the lens of conflict theory, though. It can be applied to almost any situation. Take the justice system, for example. Conflict theory would highlight how the people with power are able to mold the system into something that disproportionately affects minorities and the poor. The people in charge are able to use their positions to maintain control and give themselves privileges that aren't shared by others.
Books I received were like windows that allowed me to see people, places, and things that truly enriched my soul. These books helped me to realize what happened inside of me that led me on a path to prison. They also helped me to realize why society locked me away in prison.
Previous experiences, understandably, lead people to see things with bias instead of objectivity. That's not immoral, it's just how learning works. What is wrong is clinging to those preconceptions when they're challenged. Being able to change your mind and let go of long-held ideas is hard, but it's a necessary skill. Someone without practice in reflexivity is more likely to be shaped by the social structures around them rather than forming their own set of standards and morals through introspection. Any group or system that fulfills social needs and has a set of norms is a social institution. There are many kinds, but a few big agents of socialization are religion, education, media, government, and even the economy. The first social institution that people encounter, and one of most people's largest influences, is family. Through it, people begin to gain an understanding of what is expected from them in terms of how to act and what kinds of beliefs and values are important to cultivate. These norms can be formal, like how schools reinforce rules such as keep your hands to yourself and be on time, or they can be informal, like how the mannerisms of one's role models and peers are adopted through observation. Sometimes people are forced to dramatically and rapidly change their behavior, which is called resocialization. One example would be going to prison, since life on the outside, for most people, is immensely different from life on the inside. Prison is an example of a total institution, where the people in it are fully separated from people outside of it. Socialization is a lifelong process. There is no point where someone can say, well, guess I'm done now.
I've set my heart on improving my writing. I'd like to write a novel, or maybe even a screenplay or something like that. Anything that's creative, really. Poetry, whatever. I'm just trying to find ways to express myself, you know?
Whether we're aware of it or not, socialization is constantly occurring. And when there are influences impacting the way someone feels, thinks, and behaves, it's good to be mindful of those forces. Socialization keeps traditions alive through imparting norms to new members, like children. They can also include detrimental practices, such as rigid expectations for people based on their race, gender, age, or wealth. Anticipatory socialization prepares people for future life roles, like little kids playing house or soon-to-be parents reading baby books. Socialization shapes how we see ourselves, which is a large part of something called the looking glass self. This concept explores how people's understanding of themselves is partially shaped by their perception of how others view them. People, to varying degrees, compare themselves to others in order to check whether they are meeting the social standards required to remain a member of their group. The United States has, undeniably, taken part in some less than stellar practices. The forced removal of Native Americans and the slavery that began in 1619 and was formally put into law in 1705 became the backbone for the country's growth, wealth, and power. And legal rights aren't just ancient history. The Civil Rights Act and the legalization of interracial marriage didn't happen until the 1960s. When delving into complex racial history, it's important to define a few terms that most lay people use interchangeably. Race is a social construction based on superficial characteristics. Ethnicity is a shared culture and is different from a nation of origin. For example, Vietnam can be someone's nation of origin, but there are 54 formally recognized ethnic groups. Small groups sometimes join together in a pan-ethnic group, like how people from a variety of different backgrounds can all identify as Latino. A minority is any group of people who, because of unchangeable physical or cultural differences, are singled out for unequal treatment. Sometimes a minority group can even be a larger number of people, as evidenced by apartheid in South Africa. Further, a stereotype is an oversimplified generalization about a group of people. Sometimes people can intend for a stereotype to be positive, like the belief that all Asians are good at math, but that still puts others into a restrictive box built by your own expectations for them. Prejudice is a feeling towards another group that isn't based on personal experience with that group, although confirmation bias can occur after gaining experience. Discrimination is the actions that are performed against a certain group. They can be overt, like a whites-only sign, institutional, or individual. Racism is a stronger combination of prejudice and discrimination, and is used to justify inequalities by claiming that one group is superior or inferior to another. These differences may seem trivial at first, but they can lead to unequal treatment, often unconsciously, towards other groups. We can see an example of this in the vastly different rates of incarceration. Social stratification is how societies rank individuals based on factors like wealth, income, education, and family background. It shares similarities with geologists' definition of stratification, which are the distinct layers found in rock. In a closed system, there is little possibility for one's social standing to change. You're locked into whatever you're born with. An open system is based on achievement, and the different levels are able to interact with each other or change more than in a closed system. A meritocracy is a hypothetical version of an open system where personal effort and merit would increase or decrease social standing in proportion to actions, but a true version has never quite come into fruition in real life. Global stratification also occurs. Areas that were the first to become industrialized, like the US and much of Europe, had a head start. The GDP and standard of living grew wider, and it's difficult to be competitive in a race when some people had a head start. A concept called primitive accumulation can be observed on both an individual and global scale. This is the recognition that capital doesn't just come from nowhere. Fortunes were built off the theft and exploitation of others. Those advantages, or lack of, compound generation after generation.
For someone in society to totally understand the necessity of books in an isolation unit, they would almost need to experience it firsthand. Books can save a man's sanity. Just recently, I read a book called The Education of Little Tree that moved me to tears. I cried like a little boy. It cleansed my soul and opened feelings I had buried deep within myself.
Like any scientific field, sociology follows the scientific method, although it took some work to get there. Much of early sociology included pseudoscientific ideas of biological racism, which were especially challenged by civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois around the turn of the 20th century. There are a great deal of methods with which studies can be conducted, and even more variety in the effectiveness and ethical considerations. The Hawthorne effect describes how behavior changes when study participants are being observed, but without informed consent, it's unethical to study someone. Primary source data collection can involve methods like surveys, observations, and experiments, while secondary data uses already completed research. One dataset can be interpreted entirely differently based on the perspective of the person examining it, especially when the data is qualitative, meaning it's descriptive or opinion-based. Quantitative data still has interpretive wiggle room, but uses numerical data. One type of qualitative data would be something like literacy rates. In the table here, we can see a significant difference in literacy between incarcerated and non-incarcerated people overall, but the data doesn't end there. When you look closer at the racial disparity, we can see another significant difference between groups. There's also a smaller difference between Black and Hispanic people regardless of whether or not they're incarcerated, showing a likelihood of fewer educational opportunities before they ever became involved in the prison system. Prisons and jails ban more books than all public schools and libraries combined, but only 28 states even track their banned titles. Censorship is widespread and inconsistent. A Title I prisoner may be allowed to have, another may not, even at the same facility. Staff are able to make personal, often rash, choices on what to allow. There's also content-neutral censorship, which limits who can mail in literature, how a package has to look, prohibiting types of books like hardcover or fiction, or even limiting the number of images that can be in the text. Censorship is justified as necessary in order to prevent contraband from being smuggled in, but the evidence shows those measures are ineffective. After 5 years of fully digitizing mail, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections drug test rate among incarcerated people was 2.7 times higher than prior to the policy's implementation. Prisons also have vastly different library options from facility to facility and are usually stocked almost entirely by donations. The only required texts a prison must provide are legal references. Even when libraries are present, they can be frustratingly inaccessible. A pod may house 70 people, but library access may only be granted to a maximum of 10 people per week. Most facilities view reading materials as a privilege, which means the loss of them is an ever-present threat. Usually when you run into trouble, you need them most of all, like in solitary confinement. Finally, many ideas meant to solve problems just create new, sometimes worse ones. Prisons usually employ a pay-per-minute format when they make the switch to digital materials. Not only does this limit access even more for indigent prisoners, it justifies the banning of physical book donations and provides yet another source of profit that goes directly to the prison.
A book will take you to places you've never been, places you never imagined you'd go, places unseen, as if in a dream, places better than the place you're in. Your body may be bound within walls that surround, yet the mind remains free if one has a book to read. It's the best solution for life, while life is passing you by.
It's easy to reduce the benefits of accessible literature to the measurable statistics. Improved recidivism rates, more job opportunities on the outside, a better educated public. These do matter. But it's important to remember that access to literature helps people to feel like a human being, pass the time, and to experience thoughts beyond their caged existence. To live a life fully controlled is no life at all. Is that a humane punishment? Should it only matter if it affects you or the people you love?